Hello. My name is Arabella Whitmore. And tonight my husband is going to take off my glasses. Not to kiss me. Not to help me. But to propose to someone else. While everyone watches and applauds. They think I can't see. They think I'll stay silent. They're wrong. The laughter hit me before the words did. It slid under my skin like humidity, thick and clinging, too sweet to be sincere. I stood near the edge of the patio, my navigation glasses catching glints of string lights above us, soft halos blinking between oak branches. Someone had set the table with linen napkins and floral centerpieces, pretending it was just a barbecue. It wasn't. It was a staged performance. And I was the decoration. Darian's hand brushed my cheek. I flinched before I could stop myself. He mistook it for affection, leaned in, and said, "Let me take these off, love. You look perfect tonight." The glasses slid off. My vision, perfectly intact, adjusted instantly to the glow around us. I focused on his face, on the space just over his shoulder, where Maylis stood with her hands fluttering near her chest, her eyes wide and gleaming. My stomach turned before he even bent down. Then he dropped to one knee. Cheers exploded around me, followed by claps and camera flashes. A child shouted, "Say yes," and Maylis gave a little sob, covering her mouth. My husband was proposing. Not to me. Not in private. But in front of his family, my family, our community, on the same lawn where he once vowed to protect me after I lost my sight. I didn't blink. I watched. "Of course I'll marry you," Maylis breathed. Gasps. Applause. One cousin squealed, "I knew it. They're perfect together." I set my paper plate down slowly, careful not to tip the coleslaw. Across the lawn, Isolde leaned toward Aunt Trudy, wine glass raised just below her lips. "She's blind," she said with a smirk. "Not smart." They laughed. I heard them clearly. The words didn't stab, they settled. Like dust over a decade of silence. I'd memorized these voices. Darian's voice when he promised me safety. Isolde's when she swore I'd always have a place in this family. They were lines rehearsed, repeated, hollowed out over time. Tonight, they had new meaning. Not comfort. Not love. Just proof that I'd been a placeholder, until a better version arrived. The sound around me swirled, glasses clinking, someone tuning a guitar, a child giggling. None of it felt real. My knuckles tightened around the edge of the table. My jaw locked, breath shallow. I could scream. But I didn't. They were counting on that, on my silence. Don't give them the performance they expect. Instead, I turned slightly, catching Darian's reflection in the stainless steel of the outdoor grill. His face gleamed with pride, his arm curled around Maylis's waist. He looked satisfied. Like a man who'd completed a difficult task and was ready to take credit for the sacrifice. He believed I couldn't see him. But I saw everything. I saw the lipstick smudge on his collar that didn't match mine. The way his fingers gripped Maylis's hip, too familiar for something new. I saw the way Isolde nodded at her son, approval passed down like inheritance. 3 years ago, I lost my sight in a car accident. Darian cried at the hospital. He held my hand and whispered, "I'll never leave a woman who can't see." Back then, I thought blindness revealed true love. I thought vulnerability would deepen connection. Now, I know better. It didn't reveal love. It revealed opportunity, for him. He became the doting husband. The man who stood by his disabled wife. He built a story around me. One the community adored. One the donors believed. One the cameras ate up. And I let him. Because I thought staying silent was safer than being alone. My breath caught as I watched Maylis press her face into his chest. Her shoulders shook, either from laughter or tears, I couldn't tell. Either way, she was winning. And they knew it. All of them. Someone tapped a spoon against a glass. To Darian and Maylis, someone called. I turned, my vision clear, my ears sharper than ever. A lifetime of listening in the dark had trained me well. "She'll be fine," I heard a neighbor say. "She's strong." "She's a saint," another replied. Still smiling through it. Still smiling. That's what they saw. A woman wronged, but kind. Betrayed, but quiet. A blind, noble wife who would step aside for the greater good. But I wasn't smiling for them. I wasn't smiling at all. Inside, something was cracking. Not breaking, but shifting. Solidifying. A cold awareness spreading through me like winter frost under the skin. They thought I couldn't see. They thought this would pass unnoticed, like background noise in a life muted by pity. But they forgot who I was before the darkness. Before the surgeries. Before the silence. I was Arabella. I built systems, solved problems, developed technologies to help people find their way back to themselves. I had vision even when my eyes failed. And tonight, I saw everything. I saw my mother-in-law's wine-stained teeth as she smiled over her cruelty. I saw Darian's self-satisfaction. I saw Maylise bathed in light she didn't earn. And I saw the people who once called me family clapping for my erasure. The lights above us flickered as the evening air turned cool. Somewhere, someone started a song. I didn't hear the melody. Just the beat of my own pulse, steady, unshaken. I took a slow step back from the table. They didn't notice. I wasn't the main character anymore. I was background. An accessory to the narrative they preferred. Good. Let them believe that. Let them believe the story they wrote for me, docile, unaware, left behind. Because that's the story I was about to burn. The applause still hung in the air when the night began to twist. I could feel it, people glancing at me, their eyes full of something that wasn't pity. It was pleasure. A strange kind of satisfaction, as though my silence had become the entertainment. The laughter, the chatter, the music, they all blurred into a single hum. I stood there, smiling faintly, holding the empty plate against my stomach so they wouldn't see my hands shake. Someone shouted, "Kiss her again, Darian." And he did. He kissed Maylise while the phones flashed, while his mother dabbed her eyes with a linen napkin. I watched quietly, softly, memorizing every detail. The silver lights reflected on the diamond ring, the same kind of glint I used to think looked like love. I studied their faces, their joy, their certainty that I couldn't possibly understand what was happening right in front of me. Darian lifted Maylise off the ground, spinning her like a man in a commercial for perfect families. My throat tightened, but I didn't blink. I counted his rotations, 1, 2, 3, and told myself to breathe. He had once spun me like that after I came home from the hospital. He said he wanted me to feel normal again. Tonight, he used the same movement, the same charm, just with a new woman. The choreography hadn't changed. Only the partner had. Near the porch, a young neighbor was holding her phone, live streaming the entire spectacle. I could hear her voice between bursts of laughter. Darian just proposed to his coworker, and his blind wife is right there. Look, she's smiling. Her words floated toward me like confetti, bright, cruel, and impossible to pick up once released. I could see the screen, my own blurred figure standing still in the background of their celebration. Comments flooded the stream. So beautiful. Love always wins. She's such an inspiration. Each phrase struck deeper than any insult. They were praising me for not knowing. They were applauding my ignorance. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted blood and still kept the same soft smile. The world loves a silent woman. Especially one who's supposed to be broken. I remembered another room, 2 years earlier, full of doctors and fluorescent light. I had been sitting across from a specialist, anxious about the surgery that might restore my sight. Darian held my hand and spoke before I could. She's a fighter, he told them proudly. She doesn't let anything stop her. Everyone smiled at him like he was a hero. I smiled too, grateful for his faith. But looking back now, I can see it clearly, he was selling a story. He was polishing an image. Even then, he was branding me. A gust of night air brushed against my face. The smell of barbecue mixed with perfume and champagne. My mind replayed every cruel line I'd heard that evening like static I couldn't turn off. She's blind, not smart. She's strong. She smiled. No one said, she deserves better. No one ever did. Darian walked past me toward the house, his arm around Maylise. He didn't even look at me. Isolde followed, telling someone that love has a funny way of finding its true match. Their voices faded into the clinking of glasses. I stayed where I was, near the table with half-eaten cake and lipstick-stained cups. My body felt weightless, as if I might drift away if I didn't ground myself. I pressed my hand to the table's edge, feeling the rough wood against my palm. Quietly, slowly, I told myself to hold on, to every detail, every sound, every word. They would matter later. Across the yard, the neighbor's phone was still recording. The camera lens caught my face again. I didn't turn away. Let them have it. Let them record their version of events, the blind woman's quiet dignity. Because one day, they would replay it, and see what I saw. The girl holding the phone whispered to her friend, "She doesn't even know. Poor thing." And her friend answered, "Maybe it's for the best. Why ruin a happy moment?" I almost laughed. Happy moments built on lies don't last long. They rot from the inside out. I learned that gently, slowly, through years of pretending not to notice. Someone approached from behind me. The sound of heels on the patio, steady, deliberate. I didn't turn until her perfume reached me, soft and expensive, the kind you buy to impress mothers-in-law. "Arabella," Maylise said. Her voice was syrup, sweet enough to make my stomach twist. "I hope this wasn't too much for you. I know it must be unexpected." Unexpected. As if betrayal could ever be surprising after so many rehearsals. I nodded once, keeping my expression calm. "You're right," I said quietly. "It was unexpected." She hesitated, maybe waiting for a reaction, a tear, something she could feel good about later. When I gave her nothing, she smiled wider. "You've always been so gracious. Darian says you're the strongest woman he's ever known." I looked at her then, directly, until she shifted under the weight of it. "Thank you," I said. "I'm used to being part of someone else's story." Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second before she turned away to rejoin the celebration. The night buzzed with congratulations and half-slurred blessings. I stood there, breathing evenly, while something inside me settled into place, not rage, not grief, but resolve. The kind that comes quietly, like a tide turning. I realized that my silence was no longer their safety. It was my strategy. Under the string lights, Darian raised his glass again, toasting to love, to family, to second chances. I watched him, memorizing the shape of his words, the practiced humility in his tone. The people around him cheered, and for a brief second, I felt a strange sense of peace. Because they were writing the final chapter of their version, not realizing I was already outlining mine. The music started again, an upbeat song about forever. I stepped back into the shadows near the fence. The cameras lost sight of me. The noise softened until it sounded like the ocean, distant and harmless. I exhaled slowly. Everything that mattered tonight had been captured, his proposal, her tears, their laughter, my stillness. Proof. All of it framed by their arrogance. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to explain. The truth was already recorded, waiting quietly, ready to speak for itself. The air cooled as the guests began to leave. Someone shouted goodnight, someone else called out a prayer for love's endurance. I smiled politely at each farewell. My mother-in-law hugged Maylise near the doorway, whispering something I couldn't hear but could guess. Blessings for the new couple. Warnings about me. It didn't matter. When Darian finally came toward me, his eyes were bright with triumph. "Are you all right?" he asked, pretending concern. "You've been so quiet tonight." I met his gaze, soft but steady. "I didn't want to interrupt your big moment," I said. He laughed lightly. "You're amazing, you know that? Always so composed." "Always," I echoed, smiling faintly. He kissed my cheek like a brother might, already turning away. The smell of cologne lingered as he left me standing in the same spot. For the first time in years, I felt the weight of silence shift from burden to weapon. Quietly, slowly, gently, it was becoming mine again. By the time the last guest left, the yard was littered with confetti and paper cups. The moon hung low, soft against the smoke drifting from the grill. I traced the edge of my glasses, folded neatly on the table, and whispered to no one, "You think this is over?" It wasn't. The drive to Silas's cottage felt endless. The road wound through marshland and moonlight, each curve pulling me farther from the noise I'd left behind. By the time I arrived, my hands were stiff from gripping the steering wheel. I didn't bother turning on the lights. The house smelled like cedar and old rain, a scent that once meant safety when Darian brought me here years ago to visit his uncle. Tonight it meant something quieter, something I could almost trust. Silas opened the door without a word. His hair was mussed, his face unshaven, eyes soft in a way that made me want to collapse. He just nodded toward the guest room. "You can stay as long as you need," he said, voice low, rough from sleep. Then he handed me a mug of tea and left the door open behind him, as though he knew closed doors felt like traps to me. I sat on the edge of the bed, tea cooling between my palms, the clock blinking 2:04 a.m. I hadn't spoken since the party. My throat felt raw, though I'd barely used my voice. The silence pressed heavy against my ribs. The longer I sat, the louder my heart sounded, steady, stubborn, alive. The room was small, neat. A folded quilt at the foot of the bed, old photos lining the dresser, Silas in uniform, his late wife smiling beside him. I remembered her funeral, how Darian gave a speech about family and legacy. I had believed every word then. Now I heard them differently, every phrase a brand, every sentiment rehearsed for applause. I took off my contacts, my eyes adjusting to the dark. The irony wasn't lost on me. Everyone still thought I couldn't see. They believed I was helpless, blind to their cruelty. But I saw everything. And now, without the lenses, the world blurred again, not into darkness this time, but into something softer. Maybe the truth needed to blur before it could make sense. I walked to the mirror. My reflection stared back, unfamiliar. My hair had come loose from its braid, my lipstick was smudged at the corners. I looked like someone who'd witnessed the end of her life and hadn't yet started the new one. My fingers brushed the counter, trembling slightly. I whispered, "You made me your symbol. Now watch what I make of that." The words steadied me. I whispered again, slower this time, softly, as if repeating a prayer I meant to believe. "You made me your symbol. But I decide what it means." A memory flooded in before I could resist it, the hospital room 3 years ago, after the surgery that had failed to restore my sight. I was bandaged, fragile, barely breathing through the pain. I remembered the smell of antiseptic and roses. Isolde had come in with a camera crew from her charity foundation. She held my hand for the photo, whispering into my ear, "You're the daughter I never had." My chest had cracked open with gratitude. I'd cried into her shoulder. The cameras clicked like metronomes. Later, I found out she'd posted the photos under the caption, "Strength through faith." It wasn't love. It was optics. I leaned my forehead against the mirror, eyes burning. My voice came out rough, "You built your reputation on my pain." The mirror fogged with my breath. I wiped it clean and stared until I could almost forgive the woman staring back. Almost. There was a light knock at the door. Silas entered quietly, carrying a blanket folded over one arm. He didn't speak, didn't ask questions. He just placed it at the end of the bed. I reached for his hand without thinking. "Did you know?" I asked. He hesitated. His voice was steady when he said, "I suspected. But some things, people need to see for themselves." I nodded slowly. I saw enough. He squeezed my hand once, gently, before leaving. The click of the door latch felt like a promise, not a prison. For the first time that night, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I sat down at the small desk by the window. The tea was cold now, a thin film on top. I opened my laptop. The blue glow cut through the dark like a confession. My hands moved automatically, folders, files, new directory. I titled it, "The Truth They Forgot I Could See." Inside, I began to collect pieces of my life that had been twisted into his narrative. The live stream from the party. The voice recording from the neighbor's video. My journal entries from the past year, documenting the things Darian said when he thought I couldn't hear. "You're lucky I stayed. You should be grateful people still invite you places." Each word I'd swallowed back then felt heavier now, but gathering them felt like breathing again. Slowly. Quietly. Steadily. I didn't send anything yet. I wasn't ready to expose him. Not tonight. The truth could wait until morning. Power, I realized, wasn't in speaking first, it was in knowing when to stay silent. I stretched out on the bed and stared at the ceiling, tracing cracks in the paint with my eyes. The sound of rain began, faint against the windows. It soothed me, steady and rhythmic. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. The kind of softness that rebuilt bones instead of breaking them. Another memory pulled me under before sleep could. The first charity gala Isolde hosted after my accident. Darian had given a speech about overcoming adversity. I stood beside him, smiling for the cameras, feeling the flashbulbs against my skin like heat. Afterward, he told me I'd done great. "You're a natural inspiration," he said. "You make people believe in something." I'd thanked him, thinking it was a compliment. Now, remembering his tone, I knew it was ownership. The rain grew louder. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, scrolling through old messages. Years of words I hadn't deleted because I still needed proof of what was real. Then I found it, a voicemail from Maylise, dated years ago, when she was just an intern under me at the lab. Her voice trembled through the speaker, "Arabella, I don't know what I'm doing. You're the only one I trust." I listened twice. The first time hurt, the second time hardened me. My lips tightened around a breath I didn't release. Trust. That's where it always started. Not with betrayal, not with cruelty. Trust was the opening act. I closed my eyes and let the sound of rain fill the room. My mind drifted through the years, every kindness that had turned into leverage, every promise twisted into debt. They had all mistaken my silence for weakness. But silence, I was learning, was the sharpest blade when handled with care. The tea mug was empty now. The rain slowed, tapping softly against the window pane. I whispered to myself, gently, almost kindly, it's time they remember who I am. I woke to birdsong and the hum of a ceiling fan above me, its blades stirring the warm morning air. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. The sheets were softer than mine. The light was different, gentler, older somehow. Then it returned. The weight. The sound of applause, of cameras, of my husband's voice kneeling for someone else. The bed creaked as I sat up. My body ached, not from exertion, but from restraint. Silas's guest room was simple. A wooden cross above the window. A faded quilt. My bag still sat unopened near the door. I hadn't even unpacked a toothbrush. I reached for my phone. The screen lit up with notifications, texts, missed calls, a blinking red dot on the video app. My fingers hovered, uncertain. Then I tapped. The video was everywhere. The proposal. The kiss. Maylee's crying. Me, in the background, standing like a statue. One headline read, "Blind wife smiles as husband proposes to his new love, a story of grace." I watched in silence. My heart didn't pound. It pulsed gently, steadily, like a metronome clicking toward a choice I hadn't yet made. My fingers swiped through the comments. He's such a good man. She's so lucky he stayed with her this long. She's blind but beautiful. What an angel. I set the phone down slowly. You built a platform on my blindness, I whispered, my voice barely there. But you forgot I had a mind too. In the corner of the room, my laptop waited. The charger light blinked like a heartbeat. I opened it, the screen washing the room in blue. My fingers moved with quiet purpose. I pulled up my old cloud storage, the one I hadn't touched since before the surgeries. There it was. A folder titled, Security, Housefront/Back. I had forgotten we'd installed those cameras when I first lost my sight. Darian said they were for protection. That he wanted to keep me safe. I never questioned it. I clicked. The system had auto-synced. There, in full resolution, was the backyard. The string lights. The barbecue. The exact moment he bent down, slid the ring onto Maylis's finger, and pulled her into a kiss. But it wasn't the proposal that stopped me. It was the audio. Isolde's voice, clear as glass. She's blind. Not smart. The laughter. The applause. My stillness. I sat back in the chair, stunned. But there was more. A second camera, from the home office. I clicked it, expecting nothing. Instead, I saw Darian, alone, rehearsing. He stood in front of a camera, holding my prototype. The navigation glasses I built after my accident. My hands had shaped every curve, soldered every wire. He turned it toward the lens, speaking with practiced sincerity. Our patent-pending design was inspired by my wife's journey, he said. I helped shape it into what it is today. We hope to change the way we care for the visually impaired. I tasted metal in my mouth. He wasn't just rewriting history. He was erasing me from it. My memory flickered, our garage 3 years ago. Me hunched over a soldering table. He brought me coffee, told me I was brilliant, took notes on a napkin. I just want to understand what you're doing, he said then. So I can explain it better to investors. I believed him. I believed everything. Now I knew better. I closed the video. My hands were shaking, but not from sorrow. From anger. From something sharper. Something clearer. You didn't just take my eyes, I whispered. You tried to take my mind. I copied the videos to a flash drive. Named the folder Darian_media_lie_01. Each keystroke felt like a stitch in something torn. A quiet act of reclamation. Silas knocked gently and stepped in without waiting. He carried 2 mugs of coffee, the steam curling around his lined face. He said nothing, just set them down and pulled up a chair. They always underestimate quiet people, he said finally. But quiet isn't weak. I looked at him. I'm done being quiet. He nodded once, slowly, like he'd been waiting to hear those words. We sat in silence for a while. The morning light shifted across the floor. Outside, a lawn mower hummed down the block. I slipped the flash drive into a metal case, tucked it into my bag. A message pinged on my phone. From Maylise. We should talk before this goes further. Of course. She was always the messenger. Always the one sent to smooth things over before the real damage began. But it was too late. I had already seen too much. Heard too much. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked outside. The air smelled of grass and old pine. A breeze tugged at my hair. Across the street, a boy rode his bike in slow circles. Life went on. Even when yours felt paused. I stood on the porch and closed my eyes. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel lost. I felt aligned. Like something inside me had clicked into place. I remembered a line from an old journal entry, "You are not the damage done to you." I repeated it now, gently, like a song. I am not the damage. I am not the damage. The line between courage and exhaustion is thinner than I ever realized. 2 days had passed since the barbecue, and sleep had become a stranger that hovered just out of reach. By the time I pulled into the driveway of the house that still bore my name, the morning sun had already burned through the haze that clung to Charleston's horizon. The lawn looked perfect, trimmed and edged. The mailbox gleamed. It all looked so familiar, and yet, like something out of someone else's life. I parked in front of the porch and sat there for a moment, hands resting on the steering wheel. The house felt alive, but not with welcome. I could almost hear echoes from the night of the party, laughter trapped in the wood panels. My initials were still stitched into the welcome mat, though one of the letters had begun to fade. I used to wipe my shoes there before coming inside, always careful not to track dirt over the floors I refinished myself. Back then, the gesture felt like respect. Now it felt like irony. The door wasn't locked. I turned the handle and stepped inside without knocking. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and grilled smoke. No voices. No movement. Silence, but not peace. The dining table stood exactly where I left it, the same one I'd saved for months to buy, running my hands over catalogs until I found the one with the perfect carved legs. My fingers brushed the surface now, smooth, cold, indifferent. The walls, freshly painted, looked too clean. The family photos that once hung in neat lines were gone, replaced by blank space. The nail holes were still there, tiny ghosts of what used to be. The hardwood floors gleamed beneath my shoes. I had chosen them too. Every plank, every stain, every detail had been my project. Darian used to joke that the house was my real child. He would walk behind me with a cup of coffee and say, "You care more about this house than me." I would laugh then, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. Maybe he meant it all along. I moved toward the office, a room I hadn't stepped into since the accident. The door creaked softly as I pushed it open. The same desk, the same shelves, the same faint smell of printer ink. But something new sat there, a folder, perfectly placed in the center of the desk. I opened it, hands trembling though I didn't know why. Inside were printed documents, a letter of intent, neatly typed, signed. It took me a moment to understand what I was reading. A draft for a property sale. My property. My house. Only one name was listed under ownership. His. My breath caught. I closed my eyes, whispering into the empty room, "You erased me." But the paper remembers. I searched the drawers, pulling out anything that looked official. Bills, tax returns, insurance forms, all with his signature alone. But I knew the truth. I had kept backups on an old drive, the same one I'd used before we married. I pulled it from my bag and plugged it into the laptop sitting on the desk. The screen flickered to life. There it was, the original mortgage. My name listed first. I traced it on the screen with my fingertip like touching a gravestone. I remembered the day I signed it. We were in this same room. Darian smiled, told me it was just for approval. That once the financing cleared, he'd add me back on the record. I had nodded, trusting him, too tired from recovery to read the fine print. Love doesn't need backup plans, I told myself that day. How foolish that sounds now. Love always needs witnesses, contracts, proof, especially when one heart holds the power of both. I sat back, the old office chair creaking beneath me. The betrayal wasn't loud. It was quiet, methodical, like the slow dripping of a leak you ignore until the ceiling caves in. I thought about how many times I'd said yes to convenience, yes to trust, yes to keeping the peace. Every yes had become a brick in the wall he built between us. By late afternoon, I drove back to Silas's. He was sitting on the porch, a book open on his knee. He looked up as I approached, studying my face before asking anything. "You found something," he said. I handed him the folder. "He's selling the house." He flipped through the pages, whistling low. "And your name's nowhere on this." "It used to be," I said. "I have proof." Silas set the papers down carefully. "Are you going to let them do it?" "No," I said, my voice steady. "But I'm going to let them try." He nodded, the corners of his mouth tightening. "You sound like your grandmother. She always said revenge is loud, but justice whispers." "Then I'll whisper," I said softly. "But they'll hear it." That evening, as the sun dipped low, my phone vibrated on the kitchen counter. A message from an unknown number. A link. I hesitated, then tapped it. The screen filled with video. Isolde stood behind a podium, the church banner hanging behind her. Her voice carried the smooth confidence of someone used to admiration. "I'm proud of my son, Darian, and his fiancée, Maëlys," she said. Two hearts aligned in purpose. Their compassion for the visually impaired community has inspired so many. The audience applauded. She smiled, basking in it. No mention of me. Not a word about the woman who built the foundation for their story. I turned the phone off, the silence that followed heavier than the sound of applause. They were rewriting history in real time, crafting a version where I never existed. But I still had the first draft. The truth didn't disappear, it just waited for its turn to speak. I poured myself a glass of water, the tremor in my hand small but noticeable. For the first time, I felt anger rise without shame. They had taken everything, the invention, the house, my name, and now they wanted my dignity. But that, they couldn't sign away. I sat at Silas's kitchen table, opened my laptop again, and wrote an email. No greetings, no preâmbulo, no apologe. To Darian. Chichi, Isolde. Subject, property sale. I know about the sale. My name is still on the deed. You have 48 hours to fix it. Or I will. I reread it once, then pressed send. The whoosh of the email leaving was the cleanest sound I'd heard in days. Quiet, final. Not 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. I expected Darian. It wasn't him. It was Maëlys. Her message read. "I'm sure this is a misunderstanding. Maybe we can sit down like family." Family. The word used to warm me. Now it chilled me. I stared at her message for a long moment, the corner of my mouth curling. She still thought I wanted a seat at their table. That was their mistake. The message from Maëlys stayed on my screen long after midnight, glowing like an accusation. "Maybe we can sit down like family." I reread the words until they blurred, then set the phone face down. Family was a word they had worn thin. They'd used it to control, to guilt, to shame. Whatever family used to mean had been buried under signatures and property deeds. By dawn, I had decided to meet her anyway. Not because I wanted peace, but because I wanted to see what she looked like when she lied up close. The cafe she chose sat on a busy downtown street, all glass and steel and curated light. I arrived first and picked a corner table facing the window. Outside, traffic moved lazily, people carrying paper cups and briefcases, all of them chasing something ordinary. I envied them for a minute, their oblivion, their safety. Then the door opened, and Maëlys stepped in like someone entering a stage. White linen dress, glossy hair, a perfume that smelled expensive and artificial. She waved too brightly, the way people do when they're trying to rewrite a story that everyone already knows. "Arabella," she said, bending to hug me without asking. "You look great. Really. You always did." I let the hug happen. Her arms were light, her voice too sweet. She sat across from me and immediately flagged down a waiter. "2 lattes, 1 oat milk," she said, turning back to me with a grin. "Like old times." Old times? The phrase landed somewhere between nostalgia and insult. I smiled faintly. "You still order for people without asking?" She laughed, missing the edge in my tone. "I guess some habits stick." Then, lowering her voice, "Look, I don't want this to be awkward. There's been so much confusion. I just want you to know I never meant to hurt you." I watched the steam rise between us. "Confusion," I repeated softly. "Is that what we're calling it?" She blinked. "Arabella, everything that's happened, it wasn't planned. Darian and I found each other?" I finished for her. Yes, I've heard that line before. It's in every bad novel about betrayal. She flinched, just slightly. The coffee arrived. She thanked the waiter, then stared at the phone like it could save her. You have every right to be angry, she said. I just hope someday you'll understand that love it's complicated. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table. You once said I was the only one you trusted. Her eyes flickered. What? The night before your final internship presentation, I reminded her. You called me crying because you'd messed up your data set. I stayed up until 2 in the morning helping you fix it. You said, you're the only one who makes me feel safe. She looked down, her voice small. I was young. You were old enough to know loyalty, I said quietly. And I believed you. From my purse, I pulled out my phone, opened my old voice memos, and pressed play. Her voice filled the air, nervous, earnest, trusting. You're the reason I'm still trying. The sound drained the color from her face. I turned the phone off. You didn't steal him from me, I said. You stole me from yourself. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The cafe around us hummed with the sound of spoons and soft jazz. Maylee swallowed hard, forcing a shaky smile. I don't want this to be ugly, Arabella. It already is, I said. You just prefer it wrapped in pretty paper. When I stood to leave, she reached for my wrist. Please, don't do anything drastic. Darian's under so much pressure right now. His investors. I pulled my hand free. He's not the only one who can play to an audience. I walked out before she could answer. That night, I drove to Isolde's house. I hadn't planned to, not really. I told myself I just wanted to retrieve the last of my things, but curiosity guided my hands on the wheel. The house glowed in the dark, soft lamps in every window. Through the kitchen glass, I saw 2 silhouettes, Isolde and Maëlys, their heads bent close, wine glasses flashing under the light. I parked on the curb and walked up quietly. The back door was cracked open for air. Their laughter drifted out, honeyed and cruel. Once the house sells, Isolde said, her tone casual, we'll have everything tied up neatly. Maëlys giggled. And Arabella? She's blind. It'll go exactly as we planned. I didn't move. The words settled around me like cold water. Then I reached for my phone, thumb hitting record. Isolde poured more wine. Let her scream if she wants. By then, we'll have the house, the patent, and a baby in the photo. People adore a wholesome story. My chest tightened, but my voice stayed even when I stepped into the doorway. You always did love a story, I said. They froze. Maëlys gasped, wine spilling down her wrist. Isolde turned, eyes narrowing but not surprised. Arabella, she said smoothly, you should call first. It's rude to barge in uninvited. Rude? I echoed. That's an interesting word coming from you. Maëlys set her glass down too quickly, the stem snapping with a soft crack. This isn't what it sounds like, she stammered. No? I walked closer, placing my phone on the marble counter between us. The red recording light blinked. Because it sounded like you were dividing up the pieces of my life. Isolde's lips curved into something between pity and disdain. You always misunderstand. We're simply moving forward. Everyone does. Moving forward, I said. By selling my home, my work, my history? She tilted her head. You were never built for this world, Arabella. Too emotional, too fragile. Darian needed someone who could keep up. I smiled. And he found a replacement who plagiarized her mentor. Perfect symmetry. Isolde's eyes flickered. Careful what you say. You sound bitter. I'm not bitter, I said, voice steady. I'm documenting. I slid a small flash drive from my pocket and placed it on the counter beside the phone. Everything you just said. Recorded. And backed up. Twice. For the first time, I saw something flicker behind Isolde's composure. Not fear. Calculation. You think anyone will believe you? She asked. After all the sympathy you've milked? The blind wife with a vendetta? They don't have to believe me, I said quietly. They just have to hear you. I turned, walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Maëlys whisper, what do we do now? Isolde's reply was cold. Nothing. She won't follow through. I paused on the threshold, speaking softly, almost kindly. You've mistaken silence for surrender before. You won't again. Then I stepped out into the night. The door clicked shut behind me, not loud, just final. The air smelled of rain, though the sky was clear. I walked to my car slowly, each step measured. Inside, my hands trembled once before I started the engine. The house behind me glowed like a lantern, but the light felt false, too bright, like it was burning through its own lies. They thought I'd threaten them. But I wasn't there to warn. I was there to end negotiations. 2 days later, I found myself seated in the middle row of a conference hall, the kind of space that smells like new carpet and ambition. The Charleston Tech Forum banner hung across the stage. Rows of investors filled the seats, murmuring, adjusting their ties, waiting for the man of the hour. I smoothed my charcoal blazer, feeling the weight of the flash drive in my pocket, a tiny device that carried 3 years of truth. My contacts were in. My hair pinned up neatly. No glasses. No label. I wasn't invisible anymore. Darian stood backstage, half shadow, half performance. His voice came through the sound system as he greeted the crowd with practiced charm. I'd heard it 1,000 times before, steady, calm, soaked in the tone that makes people want to believe. This project began when my wife lost her sight, he said. I knew I had to build something that could give her a life worth living. Applause rippled through the hall. Cameras flashed. The screen behind him lit up with old footage, me, pale and bandaged in a hospital bed, holding his hand. The words "Hope Through Vision" appeared in white letters above the image. I watched the crowd. They were nodding, some even wiping tears. He had them. He always did. For years, I had been his story's spine. Now, I was its ghost, sitting in plain sight. He paced the stage, pausing just enough to look vulnerable. I learned that love means staying when it's hard, he said. That real innovation comes from compassion. My fingers tapped the flash drive against my leg like a war drum. My pulse stayed even, calm. Quiet power comes in waves, you wait for the right one, and when it hits, you don't miss it. On screen, a slideshow played, charts, smiling patience, the product render of my design. Every photo of the glasses was cropped to erase my initials etched near the hinge. Every patent listed his name first. Ladies and gentlemen, he continued, this is more than technology. It's a movement. Right on cue, the lights dimmed, and a video began. But instead of his prepared pitch, the sound cut into static. The screen flickered. Then, image after image appeared, not of medical innovation, but of that barbecue 2 weeks ago. The camera caught him kneeling, ring extended toward Maylise. Gasps filled the room. The next clip showed Maylise laughing, glass in hand, whispering something into Isolde's ear. Then came Isolde's voice, clear and unmistakable, she's blind, not smart. A murmur rippled through the audience. Someone near the front stood up, whispering to another investor. Then the kitchen recording began to play. Isolde again, calm and cruel, let her scream if she wants. By then, we'll have the house, the patent, and a baby in the photo. The room froze. I could hear the collective intake of breath. Then whispers, camera clicks, the sound of one investor gathering his briefcase and walking out. Another followed. Darian froze on stage. This is out of context, he stammered. His voice cracked under the weight of his own script. A woman in the front row stood, her voice sharp. You monetized her trauma. The microphones picked it up perfectly. Gasps turned to chatter, then to chaos. He tried to keep speaking, but the screen behind him stayed on a still frame, his face mid-proposal, mine frozen in the background, watching. He looked for me in the crowd. I didn't hide. Our eyes met for the first time since that night. He looked smaller somehow, a man stripped of his costume. I didn't smile. I didn't flinch. I simply watched as his empire crumbled in the span of a breath. He grabbed the mic again. This is malicious editing. Someone is trying to destroy my family. No one clapped this time. The silence was colder than the applause had been warm. He turned toward the wings, his expression slipping from control to panic. The organizers whispered behind their clipboards, trying to manage the fallout. Outside the auditorium, phones were already buzzing. I'd uploaded everything an hour before the event began, videos, transcripts, documentation. The headlines were spreading fast. Startup built on stolen tech and fake sympathy. The hashtag had already taken over, blind but not stupid. By the time Darian reached the side exit, reporters were waiting. Lights flashed again, but this time not for his glory. Questions flew. Did you fake your wife's involvement? Was the patent yours? Is it true you exploited her condition? He said nothing. His mouth opened, then shut. He ducked into the hallway, chased by the noise he once lived for. I stayed seated until the crowd began to thin. I could have left quietly, but I wanted to see it through. The sponsors gathered near the front, whispering, some shaking their heads, others already drafting statements of withdrawal. One man in a navy suit muttered, "We can't touch this now." The lights came up. The host tried to smooth things over with a nervous joke about technical difficulties. No one laughed. I walked out through the main doors, heels clicking softly on the marble. Outside, the sun was sharp, reflecting off the glass buildings. My phone buzzed nonstop, messages, calls, emails. I ignored them all except one, a notification that the video had reached 500,000 views. I stood at the edge of the steps and watched traffic pass, feeling the weight of the day settle like a tide pulling back. For the first time, I didn't feel broken. I felt exact. Precise. Inside, I could still hear the echo of Darian's voice, his perfect phrasing, his staged humility. He had spent years turning my pain into profit, shaping me into a cause. Now the cause had turned on him. My breath came slow and steady. I whispered, "You made my pain your profit. Now I've invoiced you the cost." The words left my lips quietly, like a prayer that needed no God to witness. My phone vibrated again. A new message. Isolde's name lit the screen. Just one line. "You've made your point. What more do you want?" I typed back, fingers calm, movements sure. "You'll see soon." But I didn't send it. Not yet. Some messages deserve to wait until silence has done its work. I slipped the phone into my pocket and started walking. The conference center loomed behind me, glass reflecting sunlight like judgment. Ahead, the street stretched open and ordinary. People walked by, unaware they'd just witnessed the fall of a man built on borrowed virtue. Every step felt lighter. Justice, I realized, doesn't always roar. Sometimes, it whispers through headlines in quiet vindication. Sometimes it walks away, softly, before anyone can see the tears it never lets fall. A week later, the sound of my own heels echoed against the polished floor of Cashin's office. The building was quiet, the kind of quiet that belongs to places where decisions are made in ink and consequence. He gestured for me to sit, sliding a folder across the table. The paper inside was thick, official, already stamped. "This is it," he said. "The civil suit. Once you sign, it's filed." I looked at the pages. My name, bold at the top. His name below it. Arabella Whitmore versus Darian Whitmore, Isolde Carrington, and Maylise Carrington. The first time in years that I'd seen my name restored to something that mattered. I signed without hesitation. The pen moved across the paper like a small storm. My hands didn't shake. "They underestimated me because I didn't scream," I said quietly. "Now they'll hear me in court records." Cashin nodded. "This isn't going to be easy. They'll fight back." "I know." I exhaled slowly, the sound gentle, almost like relief. "But for once, they'll have to do it on the record." He turned to another folder, the corners worn from his notes. "There's more," he said. "Something you should know before this goes public." Inside were affidavits, signed statements, one from a family acquaintance I barely remembered. My eyes skimmed until they caught on a single line that froze me in place. Maylise Carrington, biological daughter of Isolde Carrington. I looked up at him. "That can't be right." "It's verified," Cashin said. "Your mother-in-law had an affair decades ago. Maylise was the result. She hid it by registering her under another name. It's buried, but now, it's evidence." I sat back. My heartbeat didn't rise. I just felt cold clarity. All those years of watching them act like mother and daughter in spirit, it was literal. Every favor, every opportunity Maylise got at Darian's company, every photo of Isolde kissing her cheek. It wasn't affection, it was grooming. It was legacy protection. "So she planned all of this," I whispered. "The house, the invention, even the wedding." Cashin leaned forward. "It's worse. You should see this." He handed me a second document, a printed email thread from a gossip reporter. "Press tip confirms Maylise is pregnant. Isolde preparing exclusive on family redemption arc." I laughed once, quietly, the sound dry. A baby for headlines. Of course. "They're trying to reframe the story," Cashin said. "You'll be painted as the bitter ex, the woman who couldn't let go. They'll call it redemption through new life." I stared out the window, the skyline hazy in afternoon heat. "Then I won't play the victim," I said. "I'll be the verdict." He watched me carefully. "You know this could get ugly." It already is. Later that day, I walked into the courthouse alone. The hall smelled of paper, old wood, and something metallic, like responsibility. I filed claims for defamation, intellectual property theft, emotional exploitation, and breach of fiduciary trust. The clerk glanced at me over the counter, polite but curious. "This isn't revenge," I told her, signing the last page. "This is correction." She nodded as if she understood. Maybe she did. Outside, the wind picked up, tugging at my jacket. I stood on the courthouse steps for a long moment, watching the people pass below, lawyers, secretaries, parents holding children by the hand. All of them moving forward in ordinary ways. I envied the simplicity of it. Then I straightened, ready to move again. Quietly. Steadily. That afternoon, I stopped by a cafe near the square. I just wanted coffee, but fate, as always, has its own sense of humor. Isolde was there. She stood by the counter, pearl earrings glinting, her voice still honeyed for strangers. When she turned and saw me, the mask faltered. Only for a second. Then she smiled. "Arabella," she said smoothly, "how nice to see you out and about." "Surprised I can still walk?" I asked, keeping my tone calm. Her smile stiffened. "You've made quite a scene. All these stories online, surely you realize what you're doing to our family." "Our family?" I repeated. "You destroyed that long before I filed a single document." "You've destroyed us," she snapped, the words losing their sugar. I leaned on the counter, meeting her eyes. "No. You did that the moment you mistook silence for submission." Her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee. "You'll regret this. People tire of sympathy." "I'm not asking for sympathy," I said softly. "I'm demanding truth." I left her standing there, pearls gleaming like armor, her reflection warped in the cafe window. The world outside looked clearer somehow, sharper. A few days later, my announcement went live. I had spent weeks preparing it, though no one knew. A press release, a video, a new foundation, the Clara Trust, named for my grandmother, the woman who taught me to fix what was broken instead of throwing it away. The video opened with my voice. "This is for every woman told she's lucky to be included in her own story." It wasn't angry. It was steady. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. The foundation's mission was simple: to develop technology that restored autonomy for women with disabilities. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. In the press statement, I wrote one final paragraph: "Charity without integrity is exploitation in disguise. Empathy means nothing when it's used for profit." The message caught fire. Interviews followed, donations poured in, journalists called it the rebirth of a real hero. I didn't care about the titles. I cared that my work finally existed under my name again. Then, one evening, as I sat reviewing grant proposals, Cashin called. "Turn on the news," he said. Isolde's name flashed across the screen. Court freezes property sale amid fraud inquiry. Her face looked older under studio lighting, makeup unable to hide the cracks. Behind her, Darian avoided cameras, head down. I exhaled slowly, feeling the tightness in my chest loosen. For the first time in years, justice didn't taste bitter. It tasted clean. Cashin's voice came through the phone. "They're done. The injunction will hold." "Good," I said quietly. "Let the silence do the rest." When the call ended, I sat back in my chair, closing my eyes. The air smelled faintly of rain again, just like that first night. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere distant but harmless. It struck me then, justice was never about punishment. It was about clarity. And clarity was finally mine. 3 months later, the air smelled of salt and pine again, this time softer, freer. I walked barefoot along the marsh trail behind my cottage, the earth cool and damp under my feet. The tide whispered against the reeds, a rhythm steadier than any heartbeat I had known in years. I carried nothing, no phone, no briefcase, no reminders of the courtroom. Only silence, the kind that doesn't demand to be explained. The wind caught my hair and lifted it gently across my shoulders. I stopped at the edge of the water, where the grass bent in slow waves, and breathed in the sound of birds overhead. Everything had slowed since Charleston, the noise, the anger, the constant watching. There were no reporters now, no court dates circled on calendars. Only mornings like this, wide and forgiving. Inside, the cottage was small but bright. I had painted the walls a pale cream, like the inside of a seashell. My tea kettle hissed on the stove as I leaned against the counter, whispering the words that had become my morning prayer. 3 months. No headlines. No hearings. Just space. The settlement had been quiet, discreet. Darian had folded before the trial began, his lawyers eager to keep the scandal from bleeding further into the press. The company dissolved under scrutiny, its website gone within days. The house, legally mine again, was now rented to strangers who didn't know its history. Isolde vanished from the public eye. And Maëlys, well, her silence was the loudest confession of all. I didn't need to chase them anymore. The court had given me what paper could offer. The rest was up to time. I'd learned that peace isn't delivered, it's built, quietly, moment by moment. I poured tea into my favorite chipped mug and sat by the window. The marsh stretched beyond the glass, green and endless. My reflection looked calmer now, not younger, just lighter. For the first time in years, my face didn't belong to someone else's story. It belonged only to me. The mail arrived mid-morning, the soft clatter of metal breaking the calm. I opened the box, expecting bills and flyers. Instead, there was a single envelope, no return address, the handwriting neat and unmistakable. I knew the loops of those letters before I even unfolded the page. The baby was born. A girl. She doesn't know your name. But I will make sure she hears it. Someday. The words were written in Isolde's hand, deliberate, almost tender. I read it twice, then again. There was no apology, no admission of guilt. Just that strange mixture of pride and regret that only she could master. I folded the letter and slipped it into a small wooden box labeled Unfinished Things. Inside were fragments of a life I had chosen to release, a photo, a set of keys, a hospital bracelet. Things that once defined me but no longer did. I closed the lid slowly, gently, and set it on the shelf. Some endings don't need burning, they just need time to fade. That afternoon, I drove to the dock where I had once sat crying, the night Darian proposed to someone else in front of me. The water shimmered under the sun, calm and endless. I sat at the edge, bare feet grazing the surface. From my bag, I pulled 3 items, a printed article from that old viral pitch, a wedding photo creased at the corners, and the voided patent document, the one that finally carried my name again. I held each piece for a moment, remembering the weight of every lie it carried. Then, one by one, I released them into the water. The papers spread, softened, sank. You can't take back what was stolen, I said quietly. But you can choose what you carry forward. The words drifted out with the tide, small and certain. Healing didn't arrive suddenly. It happened softly, step by step. Later, Silas came by for lunch. He still drove the same old truck, still hummed under his breath while washing his hands at the sink. We ate outside, rosemary bread, fresh tomatoes, a little cheese. No talk of lawsuits or lawyers. Just sunlight and the smell of salt. He poured me another glass of lemonade. Do you regret it? He asked. I thought for a moment. Not exposing them, I said. But letting them write my story for so long. He nodded slowly, ice kind. That's the hardest part, reclaiming your own name. Names are funny things, I said softly. You can lose them without noticing. You can also take them back without asking. We sat there in comfortable quiet, the kind that doesn't demand words. The breeze brushed through the porch railings, warm and steady. 2 weeks later, I stood before a small crowd at the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the Clara Trust Foundation. The banner swayed lightly in the ocean air, the letters hand-painted by volunteers. Reporters held cameras, but this time, they aimed them for the right reasons. I stepped to the microphone. This foundation is not about being blind or broken, I began. It's about refusing to be rewritten. The applause came slow, genuine. Somewhere near the back, Silas clapped once, steady, proud. I smiled. Afterward, as the guests dispersed, I stayed behind to walk the property line. The grass bent under my shoes, soft and forgiving. The building would house new programs for women who needed technology to live independently, women like me, who had once been told they were an inspiration instead of an equal. When the sun began to sink, I returned to my porch. The sky was streaked in orange and lavender, the marsh alive with the hum of cicadas. A neighbor's child ran past, chasing a ball, laughing. The sound filled the air, light and clean. I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I was whole. I looked up at the stars as they began to appear one by one, faint at first, then certain. They say peace is the absence of war, I whispered. But I think peace is the choice to stop returning fire. The wind moved gently through the reeds. Somewhere in the distance, a heron took flight, its wings slow and wide. I closed my eyes and breathed. And this time, if someone tries to write me out, I'll be the one holding the pen. Peace doesn't always come from winning. Sometimes, it's choosing not to fight the same battle twice. So tell me, have you ever let someone else narrate your life only to realize it's time to take the pen back? If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There's more to come, because every quiet voice holds a powerful ending.